This is the Shatter the Script podcast. I'm your host, Jared May. Appreciate y'all joining in. If this is y'all first time listening, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We support video on Spotify and YouTube as well. You can find the audio on Apple Podcasts. For video content, you can find us at TikTok, Instagram, and X with the user tag Shatter the Script. All right, welcome to another show. It is Monday evening. Tomorrow is going to be a Tuesday, getting closer and closer to Valentine's Day. Find your loved ones out there. Give them a nice little petal of roses. There's obviously some fun topics to talk about in the NFL world in this episode. Specifically with the NFL championship weekend. You know, the NFC and AFC's battled off. You had the classic Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen. Fourth time they played each other in the playoffs. We're going to go a little bit through that and kind of essentially debunk a narrative that is being tossed around, but in a fun way, in my opinion. And then, of course, you had the Eagles, kind of the NFC Beast showdown, the Eagles versus the Commanders at Lincoln Financial Field. We're going to go into that in specific. And then, of course, we're going to stay on this topic a little bit because, more things keep developing from it. I tuned into the introductory presser, if you will, for the Dallas Cowboys' new head coach, Brian Schottenheimer. Got to listen in on, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and, Schottenheimer himself throughout the 30-minute interview and whatnot, and just kind of wanted to give my remarks and kind of introduce you to who we just hired. Because I've had multiple people come to me and ask, what is your opinions on this guy? And, I've kind of voiced my opinion on X and gained a little bit of traction doing that. So all those things will be covered in this episode in the sequence that I mentioned them. I do want to kind of promote as we get closer to the end of football in general, the season, and we enter into the off season where, you get the mock drafts and you get, the off-season free agents, OTAs, all that stuff up and coming. And if you've been a follower of this show, you know that are usually around the beginning of March, mid-March area, we start a new season of the podcast. And I released a teaser a couple of weeks or a month or so ago, kind of teasing what the theme was going to be for season 3. And there's honestly 3 different ways this is going to go. Hence it being season 3. Just to kind of give you all a little sneak peek for, the active listeners of the show. Number 1 being that we're going to keep the same title, most likely, with Shatter the Script Season 3, The Truth Behind the Lies. Kind of giving that central, kind of funny Kyler Murray dressed as Captain Price from Call of Duty, Black Ops 3 themed, kind of like, let's debunk what's classified, what's behind those black ink markers on the classified documents, and let's debunk the narrative. Continue to strengthen our awareness in that market of the sports industry. So that's kind of what the initial theme was going to be. Now, there are 2 others that are in play. And both being a different title. Because as this was my first year kind of operating solo, I obviously, if you've been a follower of the show, you knew I was in a duo. And I got the 2 great contributors who will continue to be with me throughout this process, and had a good running mate for quite some time. And we went a different direction. The interesting thing with that is you kind of want to self-proclaim a little identity that fits what the objective is now. And I think that kind of plays into what my strengths are versus and in comparison to what my contributors' strengths are. You get one guy that is really good at stat analysis and film analysis, and he really knows the ins and outs of the game. You get another guy that has tons of experience in the injury, analysis and breakdown, and he's been spot on a lot of different injury diagnosis and timelines that, if you're a follower of fantasy football and you're a follower of the sport and you want to know how your guys are doing and what just happened to him, and oh, his knee twist, oh, they hurt, it's a grade 3 sprain, like he's going to be your guy. Because it kind of gives you that, instead of just reading 2 or 3 sentences, you kind of get told, here's the truth. And I think that's what I've failed to do a good job for those two, to say, hey, look, here's how it aligns with a debunking a narrative. Because it's kind of hard. It's really difficult to convey a script when a lot of what we do does not debunk a script. And so I kind of want to play into what our strengths are. And if you listen to us, I think we do a really good job of going into the ins and outs of the technicality of the sport, to say, well, here's one thing I think this team's going to do well, and get technical with it. And it's not your typical, we try, one thing we battle just behind the scenes is how long we want the episode to be. We initially wanted 30 minutes, but if we want to get technical and throw our expertise in there, it's really difficult to do that on like a, how can you be different standpoint. So with these other 2 dimensions of that I've been thinking of, they're both under new titles, with reprise rules, with a new way of throwing out content out there, and maybe something that'll energize the crowd. A sneak peek for what that name would be the booth, like the broadcast booth. Another one would be the play-by-play with Jared May. Those are the 2 I've been considering. I just think that's more of a fun play on with words. Welcome to the booth, welcome to play-by-play with Jared May, and that's kind of part of my background is play-by-play, commentating, announcing, analyzing, and all 3 of us, we do, in our opinions, a really good job of analyzing the sport, analyzing college football, which we're going to get into a lot more, and then just having like welcome to the booth, and you have an actual guest, and I want to incorporate more of my family. I want to incorporate more guests. I want to challenge my questioning, my moderating. So a lot of those things are going to be under the hood. And I think Shatter the Script is kind of a mouthful. So just kind of put you, bring you some awareness of what I am thinking about doing, and how it's really hard to execute on a high vision without cheating, if that makes sense. A lot of people kind of make the shortcut, but I just wanted to get that out in front at the beginning of the episode, so that my followers, and you know who you are aware, that you could text me with insight and say, hey, I really like this idea. Tell me more about it. And, the last thing I'll say is I understand that we're guys. My audience is 95% male. I don't know what girl is listening to the podcast, but thank you. But the analytics show 90 to 95% male on every platform. Makes sense, right? I want to talk sports. Guys like sports. Is for the guys. And the thing with, relationships with men, and I can relate to this, is if I don't know who you are, or if I do know who you are, and I'm watching your stuff, and I see you don't have more than 10,000 followers, or that your videos are not absolutely perfectly aligned to the algorithm, that it's not perfectly cut, all those different things, like that I don't have a big name brand behind my name. I'm not sponsored by Better. I'm not sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm not sponsored by Barstool. None of it. Independent. And you knew me from across the street, or you worked with me, or you graduated with me. You just don't give a shit. I wouldn't either. So it's really hard to gather and rally up support. And I'm very thankful for the support I've had so far. But it's really hard to gather up that support from a male audience, because they might see my stuff and agree with it and say, yeah, that's a good point. They don't share. It's what we do. That's what men do. Now, flip the roles. Let's say I was a woman, hypothetically. Oh, I'd had 70 people in my comments saying, great job. Continue doing the work. You're so good. It's just funny the way it works. So I respect y'all. I respect my audience. I love any type of person that goes in and interacts, that likes the stories, that likes the posts. And you know who you are, and I appreciate you. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting. I just don't like being a bug. I don't like being a gnat. Like, someone that looks like they're bugging you when every time you look at my story. Oh, here we go. It's one of his posts. So that's a little transparency from me, some authentic kind of response to say, like, don't be afraid to show some love. I don't ask for it. It doesn't mean I don't want it. And I'm not looking for attention. And I'm not looking for fame. I'm truly looking to be an escape from, the mainstream argument and to maybe get some laughs, and so hopefully with season 3, we can do that. I think we've made some pretty large leaps in season 2. So there you go. There's a 10-minute intro. I just want to be transparent with the followers. And thank you guys. And if you skipped all the way to this part, don't worry. I'm going to mark it in the episode and say, hey, 0 to 10 minutes. It's just kind of like to my loyal fans and to our crowd and to our audience. So thank you very much. And let's get rolling with the actual show here. We want to start with the NFC Championship game. I think that's an easier one to cover. It's a little less complex. We're going to get into the AFC as well. I don't want to get into my recap of the game. The recap of the game was the Eagles scored 7 rushing touchdowns and beat the absolute snot out of the Washington Commanders to the point where they put the backups in. It's very hard to win a football game when you allow 55 points and you fumble 3 times. And it just wasn't the opponent that was supposed to be there for the Eagles. And no disrespect to the Commanders or Dan Quinn, but I want to kind of go into a little bit of 2 kind of essential pieces that are getting a lot of attention from both teams. The first one being, Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, if you're unaware, obviously he spent a lot of time with the Atlanta Falcons and is a Super Bowl appearing head coach with, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, those types of cats. And had a phenomenal year and had that notorious 28-3 lead at halftime that was a marvelous comeback from Tom Brady. And using this title, Shatter the Script, you could definitely say there might have been a script there to say, like, no other quarterback's done this. And it's something that'll haunt a head coach forever. And that's the most notorious, what everybody remembers of Dan Quinn. So when the Dallas Cowboys hired Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator, there was a kind of shift in momentum because we're like, well, he's not in a head coaching stamp. This is probably the most powerful defensive coordinator on the market currently when we hired him. It was hot. It was a hot hire. I applaud Jerry for doing it. I think things like that are what win organizations championships based on look alone, based on optics, based on optics alone. You're like, oh, him as a coordinator behind Mike McCarthy, that's a lot of good veteran leadership and experience. This could be the energy that changes the defense, as it has been a complaint in the past in Dak and Romo's career. We've never had a powerful defense. And what was the argument when Dallas got in the playoffs, those back-to-back 12-5 seasons, was they actually have a good defense. And the narrative that woke Cowboys, like the people that are seeing things for how they really are, was when Dallas played really good teams, above average teams, playoff teams, the defense historically would not show up. They would underperform. They would give up a lot of points. Notoriously, you can think of the 49ers matchups in the regular seasons versus the Cowboys. You're like, holy crap, how could it get any worse? And then the next week you turn around and play the Rams, who made the playoffs. This is just an example, and beat the ever-living snot out of them at home. Or the Giants and beat them by 50. Or the Commanders and beat them by 50. Or the Eagles and play them close every time. Or, if Dak's playing and he wasn't hurt, like, they're winning the majority of the time. So there were definitely pros and there were definitely cons with Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator. I would say there were more pros than cons. That's, as a truther, I think that is something that Cowboys fans should admit. There were more pros than cons with Dan Quinn as a coordinator. The issue was when you played, and this usually revolves around the head coach and the organization, is when you played teams with top-tier candidate coaches, such as Matt LaFleur, Mike Shanahan, people like that in primetime moments or a playoff game, everything would just collapse. And the blame would be shot directly at a quarterback, such as Dak Prescott, but it would be like fireworks. It would be like fire spread in 80 different directions, and we don't know who exactly to place the blame on. Well, Dan Quinn's led defense against good teams, blah, blah, blah. Well, Mike McCarthy in game management situations. Well, Dak Prescott always fails in critical situations. Well, if we just signed a running back. Well, if CeeDee Lamb wasn't acting like a total baby in the game and just quit emotionally. Well, if we had a guy like Des Bryant. If injuries, there were a lot of these hypotheticals and ifs and what was the real issue going on. Truth is the Dallas Cowboys, they're dysfunctional. We don't know. Well, this is about Dan Quinn. There's just a little inconsistency. You really never know what you're going to get in the playoffs from Dan Quinn. And as the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, he played with Dallas. He faced the 49ers. Well, first, I guess we should say that he faced the Bucks in 2021. And this is when, I believe, this might have been 2022. The year that Tom Brady retired. We beat the ever-living snot out of him. And the Bucks were sent home. Tom Brady retired. He said that if he ever lost the Dallas Cowboys, he would retire. He kept true to his word. And Dak Prescott had his best playoff performance in that game. 14 points, pretty good. Then he played the 49ers twice as the defensive coordinator. And in those games, he allowed 19 and 23 points, which is good enough to win the game. Now, the 49ers at those times were a premier defense. Premier. And game management played a factor. But when you're talking in terms of Dan Quinn doing his job as a defensive coordinator, 19 and 23 points is absolutely good enough to win the game. And the offense, from that point of view, did not do their job, essentially. If you want to remove all of the tangibles that matter when you're playing a premier defense. And both being road playoff games. But on paper, good enough to win, right? Then you go and play the Packers this previous season, his last year as a defensive coordinator with Dallas in the wild card round, and you let up 48 points. And if you watch that game, it was just a complete and utter disaster. Then you move to this year with his first year as the Commanders head coach, which the Commanders were in a big, big drought making the championship game in the NFC. They play the high-powered offense Tampa Bay Buccaneers, held them to 20 points. Pretty dang good. Then you go play the Detroit Lions, and then you're scoring 31 points in a half, but you let up 31. So it's like, okay, you have to score 45 points to win. Kind of a shootout game, and you should expect against a team like the Lions and an offense coordinator like Ben Johnson and an offensive caliber talented team like the Lions that you got to score more than 30 points to win. Makes sense. Then you go and play the Eagles in the championship game, which you haven't been in forever, and Dan Quinn led you there as the head coach, and they score 55 and 7 rushing touchdowns and just completely blow you out of the water. And they didn't look prepared. There was problems everywhere. Jaden Daniels got some, had to throw the ball around the damn yard all game long to climb him back into contention. Couldn't stop the run. And that's when you're like, oh, where's the consistency? There's the Commanders that we saw throughout the year. Yes, they were 12-5, but there were just games where you're like, holy crap, their defense is an issue. Their defense is a problem. And yes, they traded for Marshawn Lattimore, but it's like, which was a great trade, but there's some issues there. There's just inconsistency within the defense, and it kind of translated from, like I'm saying, that the Dallas defensive coordinator tenure to the Commanders tenure. So moving back to the Atlanta Falcons with Dan Quinn in the 2016 season, NFC divisional round versus Seattle Seahawks, Falcons won 36-20. The championship game versus the Packers, they won 44-21. Then in the Super Bowl versus the New England Patriots, the notorious 28-3 blown game, they lose 34-28 in OT. Moving on to the 2017 season, they make the playoffs again. They beat the Los Angeles Rams in the wild card 26-13 and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 15-10. So these are outstanding defensive performances outside of the Super Bowl versus the Patriots. So the question is, what happened? Where did that consistency just disappear? And obviously from 2017 to 2020-ish, when he became the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, a lot of different things happened with the game. A lot of players got moved around. But during those 18, 19, 20 seasons, there became a lot more inconsistency with Dan Quinn. It seemed that he started to get figured out from his time in Seattle and his time with the Atlanta Falcons. Still a premier defensive coordinator. But this inconsistency narrative is true. And it started once he joined the Dallas Cowboys and his final years in the Commanders. So what does that have to do with the championship game? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fortuitiveness, if you will, of Jalen Hurts' playoff experience. I think Jalen Hurts, and I've been very critical, and I have praised Jalen Hurts' ability in the playoffs. I think, in a nutshell, and what I want to go into with this is the guy just knows how to win. I think their formula for success is notorious. I think it's premier. I think that with a guy like Jalen Hurts, I think he has the most, I guess you could say, he has the most fortune in the playoffs. I think he is brought to him on a silver platter possibly the most easy breaks in the playoffs that I've ever seen a quarterback face. And when a quarterback like that faces with opportunities and you say he should win those games, and he does, I shouldn't harp on him for it, but it cannot be ignored that his playoff experience has been far easier than a lot of other quarterbacks have had to face, such as facing premier quarterback talent, premier teams, such as what the AFC faces every year. So kind of go year by year here. The first entry in 2021, he enters the playoffs, kind of a young gun, loses to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady. That year, Tom Brady and them went pretty damn deep in the playoffs, if you don't remember. That second entry in 2022, this is when they make their first Super Bowl run. And this is the one I just cannot give a whole lot of credit for, but I have to give it where it's due, if that makes sense. Like, you play the New York Giants 9-7-1 with Daniel Jones, who upset the Minnesota Vikings in the wild card round. So you get to play a divisional opponent that you've seen twice a year at home, the 9-7-1 Daniel Jones-led Giants. That's a game you should win. Well, they won. Moving on to the next round, the championship round, the 49ers without Brock Purdy. If you remember this game, they went to their emergency quarterback and eventually went to Christian McCaffrey as the quarterback. There was absolutely zero chance for the San Francisco 49ers in this game. Jalen Hurts walks away with an easy dub, a very fortuitous win. And then you go and play the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is when you're like, I don't even understand how to comprehend football. 38-35 loss. Jalen Hurts played well. It was kind of a you got to throw to win sort of game, and Jalen Hurts made some pretty damn good throws throughout the entirety of the game. And that's where I can give credit. It's like, you played Patrick Mahomes and played him within 3. Well, other quarterbacks do that too. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, players like that, they play them close. So Jalen Hurts deserves respect there. But the path to get to the Super Bowl, which everyone uses the credit for to evaluate quarterbacks, that's where I discredit it, was that year. And then you move to 2023. They play the Buccaneers again, with this time with Baker Mayfield 9-8. They lose 32-9. And if you remember this year specifically, the back half of their season, the front half of the season, they're like 10-1 or something like that. It was something incredible. They ended up losing the first seed to the Dallas Cowboys, and it just, the back half of their season it just blew up in a negative fashion. So they exit in a first round playoff wild card loss to the Buccaneers. And then you move into this year. You get a first round bye. You play the Los Angeles Rams in the snow at home, and you win 28-22. The score kind of didn't reflect how separated the game was. Saquon Barkley ran for over 200 yards. And I'm sitting here going, man, if I ever had as a quarterback with this narrative painted on me that you get a lot of hate, you get a lot of overrated, you get a lot of he ain't that good, but he is kind of good, but like there's just like split opinion. And as that type of caliber quarterback, you get rewarded with a running back who ran for the fourth most scrimmage yards in NFL history, over 200 yards in this matchup, and just game managed the shit out of the Rams. I mean, you're not asked to do much. I think he was 15 of 20 in this game. And you look at his passing attempts versus other quarterbacks, you're like, dude, this dude barely throws over 30 attempts a game. Which is a recipe for winning if you can manage it. I'm not discrediting that. I'm saying this is the most fortunate path to the Super Bowl I've ever seen a quarterback been gifted. And he's doing what he should do with it. Then you move into the championship round, Washington at home. This is, again, a divisional opponent that you've seen twice this year. You've seen Dan Quinn, and you're rewarded with 7 rushing touchdowns between Barkley and Hurts, winning 55-23. The game started off with a 60-yard touchdown run from Barkley, untouched after like 10 yards. And you're like, well, this game's over. The first drive went 20 plays for the Commanders. They went for it on 3 fourth downs. And then on the fourth one said, probably not going to go for this one. And then they did a fake punt later in the game. You're like, dude, you're just gaming. And Jalen Hurts played good. I'm not discrediting that. I'm saying it's fortunate. And now you're going to go into the Super Bowl once again versus the Chiefs in New Orleans for round 2. And you're never going to hear the end of how Jalen Hurts has been to 2 Super Bowls. Jalen Hurts potentially is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Then the argument never stops that he's just this glorious quarterback. And I think that if a lot of other quarterbacks had this experience in the playoffs, they would do the exact same thing with it. But I can't name, off the top of my head, any other scenario to where some quarterback got this fortunate in the playoffs. And I hate discrediting that because I'm just a guy sitting here with no sponsorships in my home recording this episode. I've never played an NFL down. I'm trying to paint a picture of how fortunate someone can be and what they can do with it and whether or not they capitalize on it and evaluating that for what it is. Because I think this is the reality. Because if you look at, off the top of my head, let's go with Dak Prescott. What quarterbacks has he faced in the playoffs? So we've got Jalen Hurts. You've got Daniel Jones. You've got Baker Mayfield. And you've got Matthew Stafford this year at home in the snow. And a Brock Purdy-less 49ers. And I'm not going to discredit the matchup between Matthew Stafford, but that's a pretty favorable playoff run. And when you look at somebody like Dak, rookie year, you get Aaron Rodgers. Next year, you make the playoffs, you get Russell Wilson. Then you get the 49ers with Shanahan. Not a talented quarterback over there with Jimmy Garoppolo at the time. However, when you run for a gazillion yards on our defense, it's pretty easy to win. Then you play Jared Goff's led Rams. Pretty decently talented quarterback. Hindsight's 2020. CJ Anderson ran all over the Dallas Cowboys. Then you fast forward to Brock Purdy. People say he's a pretty dang good quarterback. I say he's one of the best game managers in the league. They got a system. They stick to it. Kind of the same story with the Jimmy Garoppolo. And then Jordan Love with Matt LaFleur. So I just think that fortune has really assisted Jalen Hurts in his career. And I think if other quarterbacks were dealt the hands that he were dealt, that I think a lot of them would do the exact same thing, because when he played Brady, he lost. When he played Baker Mayfield, he lost. And nobody looks at that, and I understand. But we're talking 2 years of just kind of like, okay, very fortuitous runs, very fortunate runs for Jalen Hurts. And I'm going to get so much hate for this. But, all right, let's get into the brass tacks. The brass and tacks of the AFC Championship game. This is your Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills in Kansas City at Arrowhead. The fourth time that these two teams, and specifically these two quarterbacks, have met in the playoffs. Historically, Josh Allen is 0-3 versus Patrick Mahomes in these matchups. And I kind of want to go through a little history of that. And just because if you've been listening to the show, you understand that I am a big advocate of Josh Allen. I really think he is the most talented quarterback in the NFL. And I'm unashamed to say that. I think Patrick Mahomes is absolutely talented, wildly talented. His playmaking ability, his ability to understand what kind of calls he can get, the discipline of their team. I think all those things are great. But I've watched Josh Allen and I go, wow, every time I watch him. Without Josh Allen, that team is nothing. And I've seen the Chiefs without Mahomes playing with guys like Alex Smith, and they were making the playoffs. And you had the same argument saying, well, I'm not saying without Patrick Mahomes that they would be the same. I'm not saying that at all. I think Patrick Mahomes is the difference maker. But when you look at Josh Allen, it's like, dude, everything the Bills do is centralized around Josh Allen. Josh Allen, we need a yard. Josh Allen, we need a goal line touchdown. We need a fourth down miracle. We need a QB sneak. We need you to convert this 3rd and 12. We need you to convert this 4th and 8. We need you to do this X, Y, and Z. He doesn't. And when he plays the Chiefs, I saw a stat in all the times that they have played each other. The Chiefs have scored 243 points. The Buffalo Bills have scored 242 points. The split between that, it's almost like because when Josh Allen plays Patrick Mahomes in the regular season, it goes pretty dang well for Josh Allen. And it's almost like the Kansas City Chiefs are setting them up. It's like, we're going to let them have this one. But when we get in the playoffs, we're going to know what you're about. We game planned, and we're going to win. So that first year that they met in the championship game in 2020, the COVID year, the Chiefs won pretty handedly. Mahomes balled out. The Bills lost 24-38. Then you move on to 2021, the divisional round. The Chiefs won that notorious 42-36 game in overtime. And then following that, in the 2023 AFC divisional round, the Chiefs won 27-24 when Tyler Bass misses the field goal to tie. And that one was a home game for Josh Allen in Buffalo. So he goes home crying. And then this year, of course, the Chiefs winning 32-29. Taking it down to the wire. It comes down to a 4th down catch with Dalton Kincaid missed. And I think what's scary to me is you look at the biggest threat in the AFC to Mahomes. And Lamar has had his struggles in the playoffs. And you look at a guy like Josh Allen. He is the greatest threat to Patrick Mahomes without a doubt, no questions asked. And he can't get it done. And that's a very sad look, because we talk about it all the time. Patrick Mahomes, Mr. Inevitable. And I want to bring up this crazy stat. And I'm going to paraphrase it the best I can. And it's from Trey Wingo. I'm going to give him his credit here, because there's no way I wouldn't be able to find this stat on my own. So let me paint the paraphrase picture. In situations to where you need a touchdown or a field goal to send it to overtime or to win, those clutch moments, the NFL average is around a little less than 40% or 40% exactly, somewhere around that number. Very low. There are quarterbacks like Drew Brees who are 3 of 6. There are quarterbacks like the notorious Tom Brady who is 5 of 11. Pretty decent percentages, right? Patrick Mahomes in situations to where he needs a touchdown or field goal to take it to overtime or to win the game is 7 of 7, 100% efficient. That is the most wild stat I have ever heard. And why a lot of analysts and a lot of people that pick those games can't bet against Patrick Mahomes, because they just know that this team, the formula, is going to get it done. And when you have a wild statistic like that, and these are the stats that I believe matter, how in the world do you expect to beat Patrick Mahomes by not converting fourth downs, by having these mishaps, by getting out penalized, and by playing your absolute guts off, going match for match in stats as a quarterback and losing just barely every time? And you start to wonder, obviously the narrative here is penalties, officiating in favor of Kansas City. Is it true? Is it not true? Is the NFL rigged? Well, let's paint a picture here. Overall, penalty count since 2021 in the playoffs, the Chiefs have not had more penalties than their opponents in any game, which is quite a notable statistic, if you ask me. Over their last 11 playoff games, the Chiefs had 36 penalties, while their opponents amassed 66, resulting in a significant penalty differential. Penalty yards. In those 11 games, the Chiefs were penalized for 319 yards, in contrast to 541 yards for their opponents. I would say that highlights a substantial yardage differential, would you not? And so I did my digging, and I was like, well, this is obviously a dynasty. The Kansas City Chiefs is a dynasty. They got this hatred toward them that you just kind of can't ignore if you're a general fan of the sport, to where you say that it is rigged, to where you say that the officiating matters in games like this, such as the fourth down conversion in the QB sneak that obviously looked like, in my opinion and from the overhead cam view, that it was indeed a first down and that it was badly marked. Both plays, the play before to Dalton Kincaid on the swing pass and the QB sneak itself, I think both of them were awful marks. And I think that should be reviewed. But like I've said before, there's going to be no repercussions for that. You just kind of have to deal with it, roll with the punches, and convert. You got to execute better. And I'm not going to deny that. But I did some digging on the other dynasty that we know so well, the New England Patriots, to which we compare the current Kansas City Chiefs, the Patrick Mahomes era, to the Tom Brady era. Obviously, Mahomes is going for the first ever three-peat in the NFL, which has never been done before. And if he does this, I think Patrick Mahomes is indeed already the GOAT. Because he's done something that nobody's ever done before, and he's not even 30 years old yet. Wild. But in my digging, I was like, I wonder if the Patriots were also statistically favored with officiating. And what I found was that is true. I looked at the statistics and numbers, and I was like, the Patriots also had very, very similar officiating favorability in their playoff runs. And they have a lot more, I guess, historical context to base the numbers off of. And so I was like, does this begin to paint the narrative that both of these franchises or dynasties are copycatted? And I was like, well, what other tangibles would qualify them to be basically, well, we need another GOAT. Similar to the MJ and LeBron thing. We need another GOAT. Who's going to be our GOAT? Well, MJ was so damn good. He was undefeated. He never lost a finals. He was perfect. Down to the last minute detail. Perfect, like Homelander says. But we need a new GOAT. We need something that can get us more views. And we need something that can copycat that, but in a different fashion, to just spark some debate in the mainstream media so that we can have a conversation. In comes LeBron. LeBron, been to a lot more finals, won less. Has a lot more points, number, statistics, MVPs, played for longer, sparks a conversation. But you can't ignore the previous era to where you say, well, he was perfect. Or, well, but it sparks a conversation. Same thing with the Patriots. But things happened with these two dynasties, and a couple of them we're seeing in real time, obviously, is the New England Patriots, they also had very similar tangibles happen to them during their dynasty, such as the tuck rule. The tuck rule is a big one, and now they can, make jokes about it years on and say, well, I invented the tuck rule. Then you had the deflate gate with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and they make jokes about that one as well. Then you had the 28-3 comeback at halftime against the Atlanta Falcons. And you just think, how can this be possible? Then you had the Marshawn Lynch at the goal line. We're going to decide to throw it on this play, and it gets intercepted at the goal line. And you're like, will this ever end? How in the world does this keep happening for the same team? How can fans and a team be so fortunate, so lucky? So how does this keep happening? Are they really that good? Or are we missing something between the lines that suggests that something more heinous is occurring? And then I was like, well, let's compare that with the Chiefs. And the Chiefs, the big argument with them is officiating favoritism. And like I just mentioned with the numbers, those things are true. They are favored in officiating. They get the big calls. There's a big conspiracy going on right now where there was a flag on the play that Dalton Kincaid should have caught the ball in the notorious fourth down in this previous AFC Championship matchup that they basically had on hold. And whether I believe that or not, I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist with that portion of the game. I think that's digging a little too far. But the notorious roughing the passer calls, the notorious targeting the quarterback, the notorious, you name it. There are a plethora of calls. You're like, how in the world does this keep happening? You won 11 one-score games this season. You're talking a pinky toe against the Ravens in week 1, a highly debatable pass interference call on uncatchable ball versus the Bengals, a very weird false snap that should have been called a false start, but they negate the false start when the Raiders at 2-10 had the opportunity to win the ball game inside the 30 in plus territory. You're like, how in the world does an NFL team allow that to happen unless it was scripted, rigged? I don't know. Starting to sound like we're getting closer. Then the Broncos do their due diligence, and Bo Nix is balling out. It's a defensive ball game. Mahomes is having his struggles against a pretty top-tier defense. Bo Nix does everything he needs to do to win the game in the final moments. And what happens? The field goal, which rarely happens, the field goal is blocked. And so, like, you name all these things, you're like, how does this team keep getting so fortunate, so lucky? Are they that good? Or is this something more sinister? And I think the similarities there between the two dynasties is that I think it proves that this is a copycat. It's different in a way where it's like, well, we've never had a three-peat before. Well, we've never had a team get so fortuitous. We've never had a team that painted the narrative that, oh my God, they get so many favorable calls. They're represented by a notorious pop star in Taylor Swift that makes you think they want that script under the confetti. Kelsey and Taylor Swift, it attracts more fans to the game. It brings 15-year-old girls to the sport that just go absolutely maniac with the Kansas City Chiefs. Is something at hand here that is, what is the truth behind the lies here? And I think everything that I've kind of just played out here between the two franchises is that they're both the same, but there's different tangibles within. And it sparks a new conversation for the media to say, who's the GOAT? Well, this guy did this. Well, he did this. Well, what are your thoughts on it, Tom Brady? And I just don't think that can be ignored. I think going forward, that needs to be the voice that is heard from what we've seen in real time. And we're about to go through another Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl in New Orleans, where we say, who was the best team in the AFC? When you looked at it, you were like, damn, it's got to be the Bills or the Ravens, right? Or were the Chiefs just saving their tenacity to win these games and their determination, their perseverance and persistence of excellence for the playoffs? And they're just that damn well coached. They're just that damn well lucky. They're just that damn well fortunate that, well, no matter what Josh Allen does, no matter how well he plays, 4 different times, Mahomes is going to beat him. And you look at it, it's like, okay, this is a copycat, right? So who was the copycat arch nemesis of Tom Brady? It was Peyton Manning. Well, Peyton Manning ended up winning 1 Super Bowl before he left to a different team and won another one. 2-time winning Super Bowl quarterback. When is it Josh Allen's turn? Because obviously he's the greatest threat to Mahomes, and we're just waiting. And I think it'll come at a time when Josh Allen doesn't play Mahomes under a different circumstance, and then they'll paint that narrative. Well, he only made it because Mahomes wasn't in it. Mahomes wasn't in it. And you're like, oh. And that's a tough narrative to defeat. But after 4 times, it's like, how can you keep having the self-motivation and drive to play quarterback at such an elite level when all 4 times your team has essentially done the work to win the game and you were on the wrong side of history? You were on the wrong side of history when OT happened and people demanded that both teams got an opportunity to score because that makes sense. Then you were on the wrong side of history when your own kicker, you've done the job to tie the game and your own kicker from within a reasonable distance misses at home. Your 1 chance, gone. Then you miss another opportunity this year, and it's like, holy smokes, when is it in? And Josh Allen's face, watching him on the sideline just stare into the depths of despair, and it was a bad look, man. It was a very, very hopeless look. It was a what else can I do look. It was, I've given everything to this organization and I don't know what else I could possibly do besides self-reflect and go, I'm not good enough. I have to play better. And I can't knock on Josh Allen for any of his losses. I can't do it. I think he plays clearly well enough to win in those games. But the look on his face was, there were no words to describe it. He was completely depressed and hopeless. And it damn near made me shed a thug tear. And I really wanted it bad for Josh Allen because I've, as you know in the show, spoken so much about his success, his domination, his Superman capabilities, all of it. And that it all depends on him. And some people might say you might compare the two to good versus evil. And you're like, well, good should win, right? Good prevails. And then you watch this dude smirk after a game like Mahomes and he's giving thanks to the Lord. And you're like, how do I don't even want to hate this guy. And I think the thing that classifies this and determines my official opinion is you got the right guy at the wrong time. Josh Allen is the right quarterback. He's the right leader. He's the right talent. Just the wrong time. It's the wrong era. And Mahomes we are witnessing the greatest quarterback of our generation in terms of winning, in terms of playmaking, creativity, in terms of the drive to win championships, the discipline of the team itself. We've got the pieces. We know how to win. We got the coach. We got the tight end. We got the quarterback. And this is our formula for success. And no one can beat us. And that's sad because if you plugged Josh Allen, I know this is a hypothetical. If you plugged Josh Allen into that NFC, he would have made 3 or 4 Super Bowls by now. I believe that with every fiber of my being. You saying you're going to throw Josh Allen in the pool with Jalen Hurts, Case Keenum, Sam Darnold, old Stafford, young Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Dak? He is wiping the floor with that talent pool. Whereas on the other side, in the AFC, you got to battle through the same three people every year. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Mahomes are the three guys every year that get in. You could throw Burrow in there, but I haven't seen Burrow in the playoffs outside of that 1 year. Waiting for him to come back. He's the only guy that's been able to beat Mahomes. I don't understand it. I don't think anybody will. People say that Josh Allen is turning into the new Phillip Rivers. I don't know. But I think that concludes my analysis on that side of the AFC. I'm so sad for Josh Allen. You can't tell. Okay, let's get into the my bread and butter. Let's get into a little bit more of Brian Schottenheimer taking over the reins with the Dallas Cowboys as the head coach. Now, I got to listen to essentially the full 30 minutes of the introductory presser for Brian Schottenheimer. I'm going to call him Shotty. That way I don't have to say his damn name. Shotty. And you got Jerry Jones on the right, Stephen Jones on the left. They got their press conference. People are asking questions. And I got to listen into the terminology. And what I'm going to do is kind of summarize the event, but then kind of paint the picture and introduce yourself to who Brian Schottenheimer truly is. The questions that were asked, in my opinion, I don't think were tough enough. If I was a journalist and I was sitting there asking Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, and not Brian Schottenheimer, I don't want to attack him, but just those two guys, the questions that I wanted to ask from a fan standpoint, from a media standpoint, from somebody who wants to shatter the script, I would have been a whole lot tougher with my questions and not like basic ones like, well, what brought you to hiring Brian Schottenheimer? And the response to questions like that, where Jerry Jones went into this tantrum about how he's been to every Senior Bowl and goes into his personal life experience about how he wanted to be a coach, but he wanted to live at a higher class than what coaches lived at. He wanted to fly in jets and he wanted to get on yachts. And word for word, this is what he was saying. Didn't even answer the question. I'm telling you, Cowboys Twitter is literally just looking past all that and finding ways to say, there might be some hope. Maybe Schottenheimer, by what he said about pre-snap motion, just makes all the difference in the world. Let's believe what he says again and fall into the same fucking trap that we've been in for the last 30 years. And I'm a Cowboys fan, die hard, as we all are, as we all claim to be. And I look at this and I'm like, when the F are you guys going to wake up? And a lot of you, some of them do. And a lot of it, I think, is encouraged by getting clicks. I think it's literally encouraged by, what can I say to drive an argument to get clips? Like one of them I saw, Dan Quinn, when it comes to, giving up 50 plus points in a playoff game. And it's like, I just went through all those stats. 2 games, 2 times it's happened. The rest, very low scoring outcomes. No. And I think it's just the dysfunctional Cowboys that it really happened to. But they just will not open their damn eyes. And as I've proclaimed before, it's like sheep led to the slaughter every single season. The whole season, this is terrible. We got to find ways to blah, blah, blah. We got to get over the hump. If we're parting ways with Mike McCarthy, then we need a top candidate. We need to go interview. Let's go get Ben Johnson. Aaron Glenn seems great. These guys are both up for head coaching candidacies. We want Dion. I actually think Dion might be a good pick because he can get the locker room. And I don't think that's a good pick. Dion, I don't think so. But what fans should be upset about is the process in which this took place. Now, we have complained that the Dallas Cowboys have hired within the house historically for a while, whether that be coordinators, whether it be head coaches, defensive coordinators. They looked internally for an offensive coordinator back in the day. We're going to bring our former Cowboys legend, Kellen Moore, quarterback, to the offense coordinator, who is now offense coordinating successfully for the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. We want to hire Schottenheimer to help call plays with Mike McCarthy. And Mike McCarthy was a subpar hire based on the market at the time. The dude was sitting on the couch for 3 years. People still had hope. And he was the most winningest quarterback in, I think, franchise history in terms of win-loss rate. Something like that, I believe. And we hire within house with Kellen Moore. We hire within house with Jason Garrett. We hire within house with Brian Schottenheimer. Then we hire within house with our new defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus, who used to be our linebackers coach from 2011 to 2017 or whatever. And the process of which this happened, again, is what we should be most angry about. Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, all these different guys are up for interviews. It's the most coveted job in sports. They decided to interview Schottenheimer, Kellen Moore, Robert Saleh, and the Rooney Rule, Leslie Frazier. And there were talks of other guys. It's like, oh, Pete Carroll. No, they called Pete Carroll to get a better idea about Schottenheimer, who was in their own damn building. And so that process right there, you don't take the opportunity to interview any of the top candidates once again, is what you should be pissed about. It doesn't matter that Schottenheimer is the head coach. That's not what you should be angry about. The process at which it all took place is what you should be infuriated about, because it's not a winning formula. It's a, who else can I get? Jerry admitted it. I wanted to be a coach. He changed the terms of the agreement between him and Jimmy Johnson back in the day, where they had a deal. Jimmy handled football, Jerry handled business. But then Jerry flipped the switch and said, no, I want to handle football too. And then they started butting heads, and that's when Barry Switzer came about, which I've mentioned before. And since then, outside of maybe Parcells, I don't really know the relationship between him and Jerry Jones. But you look at Jason Garrett, all these different guys, they are all hire from within, yes men, guys that have great standing with Jerry Jones, to where Jerry is allowed to sit in the team meetings and press his agenda on the team, which has poisoned this franchise for 3 decades. And you guys still trust it, still have hope, still think there might be a possibility this works out. No, there's not. This is the same, it's the definition of insanity. It's the same solution to a problem that can be unfixed by what the solution they think is going to happen. It's the same shit. And I still see tweets. Schottenheimer talking about pre-snap motion, marrying the run and the pass together, making a couple of tweaks. All they talked about was continuity from Mike McCarthy's offense, and then making a couple of changes and letting players shine with their personalities. That's what they talked about. Schottenheimer is going to be great behind the mic. He's going to talk a great game. He's going to sound like a genuine dude. Sound familiar? Jason Garrett, players coach. When it came down to it, I tell you what, Schottenheimer, after hearing what he had to say at the meeting, you know what it sounded like? Identically, it sounded like Jason Garrett and Scott Linehan meshed together. We want to run the football at effective level, do a little pre-snap motion, and we want to really get that play action pass. You can't win a game without establishing the run or marrying the run with pass. You're like, that sounds like Jason Garrett and Scott Linehan. And a dumber down version of Mike McCarthy, who promised the exact same thing with pre-snap motion, and we were 29th ranked or outside of the top 20 in pre-snap motion. And it was something that me and the cast of this podcast blatantly criticized for 2-3 years. And let's paint who Schottenheimer is. Let's go into a little bit about his history. 25 years, never been a head coach, comes from a notorious His father was a pretty notorious coach, kind of coached under him for a little bit, but kind of want to go through his time as an offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator from on the New York Jets from 2006 to 2011. This is during the Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez era. I believe they made back-to-back AFC championship games with Schottenheimer as the OC. During this time, they ranked in 2006 18th in offense, 19.9 points per game. That ranked 16th. In 2007, they were 25th in offense, scored 16.1 points per game. That was 28th in the league. I believe they finished 4-12 that year. They bounced back the next year, going 9-7 with the 9th overall total offense with 25.3 points per game. That was ranked just outside of the top 10 at 11. Then in 2009, his final year in 2009, they were 17th ranked, 19th in points per game, but led the NFL in rushing yards. 13th in 2010, 11th in points per game. It's kind of like all mid-teens ranked all through here. Never really been top 10 in pretty much anything. It's kind of been 10 to 14-ish on everything. And then he joins the Seahawks after taking some time off from OC jobs. He took the Seahawks job in 2018 to 2020. During this time, Russell Wilson had some pretty damn good success. I think he had 40 touchdowns one of the years. They were ranked 16th in 2018, 9th in points per game. They were 10th in 2019, 10th in points per game. Back-to-back 10th ranked. 2020, they were 15th and averaged 30.6 points per game, 4th in the league, franchise record for points scored. So, as an offensive coordinator, there's some good things with Brian Schottenheimer. No one's denying that. You had a pretty damn good coach at the time, Rex Ryan with the New York Jets, and a subpar quarterback with Mark Sanchez. Then you had Russell Wilson with Pete Carroll and kind of the golden era of the Seattle Seahawks. They separated, Pete Carroll and Schottenheimer separated for mutual philosophical differences. Based on what I read, it was claimed as a firing by Adam Schefter, but they mutually parted ways per source. And then he spent some time elsewhere until he returned. I think it was on the Jaguars that he spent time on as like a passing game coordinator or something, until he joined the Cowboys as basically an offensive assistant to Mike McCarthy, who was calling the plays the last 2 seasons. Some have claimed that he had tweaked the offense a little bit this past season, which had made things a little better. However, 25 years standing, a decent resume. Someone that, like I mentioned, has not held a head coaching job and has been in the organization with the Dallas Cowboys for 2 years. This is someone who I just read out to the audience, is someone that Jerry can pull the strings with, someone that Jerry can manipulate in the team meetings, someone that won't push back on Jerry's wants and needs in the draft with the team's roster, with his stupid capologist, Stephen Jones, and the false promises that they will give the audience and the press and the media and the fans that they have learned. And nobody is more driven to win a Super Bowl than Jerry Jones, and that Stephen Jones is going to be more aggressive in their offseason approach in free agency and whatnot. I promise you it is a lie. The only year that we have seen this Dallas Cowboys team do anything special in free agency was, I believe, 2023. I think that was the year where we got aggressive in free agency and people got a little happy because we traded for Brandon Cooks and did things like that. But people seem to forget that there are so many pieces that are wasted space on the roster, that there are so many pieces that are getting older. There are pieces that we have to replace in the draft. There are a lot of things to fix that you can't just fix with 7 or 8 draft picks. But the way that they're going to be aggressive is the same way they've been aggressive in the past, and that is through the draft. We're going to take the young talent that we have drafted so we can remain under the cap, and we'll use the excuse of paying Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons to take up, just the two of those guys have already taken up over 60% of the cap, and we're going to use that as an excuse to say we can't do too much under the cap because of Dak and CeeDee Lamb. They are our scapegoats for not being aggressive. When you are the one that are writing the checks, that you are the one that are waiting long enough to pay them above market price. And they're going to pay Micah Parsons. Pretty good player. But I promise you this. You get 3 elite pieces. Dak, jersey sales. CeeDee Lamb, 88, jersey sales. And Micah Parsons on defense, your D-Ware, jersey sales. As long as we get those 3 things, we're fine. People are watching our games. People are buying our tickets. People are still getting the season tickets. People are tailgating. People are talking about us because we have big names. But can we win the big dance? No. And who's that going to fall back on? Dak Prescott. His career at Dallas is over. He will not reach an NFC Championship game. He will not reach a Super Bowl. We'd be lucky if he is healthy for a full season again. And we'd be lucky if he even made the playoffs again. But he will go down like the rest, like I've already named off so many freaking names in the past. DeMarcus Lawrence, Jason Witten, Romo, Dez Bryant, DeMarco Murray, all these different cats from the old group. And then this year, DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, all these different guys are not going to win a damn thing because of this organization. This dysfunctional, disgusting organization that lies to its fans every year, and almost the entire Cowboys Twitter fan base and analysts and people like that are posting for clicks influence you to have some hope. You should be hopeless. There is no end in sight, as I mentioned before. This is a plug-and-play continuity of Mike McCarthy at a less efficient and professional manner. That's what it is. And you'll say, well, Dak Prescott vouched for this guy. When have you ever seen a Dallas Cowboy, outside of maybe Dez Bryant, voice his opinion against the grain of the path of the Dallas Cowboys? Better yet, a quarterback say, yeah, I disagree with that hire. I think it's shit. I don't know what we're doing. I want to trade. Aaron Rodgers, maybe. But he's kind of a prick in the eyes of a lot of people. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But his antics are a little aggressive and out there for a professional. So that narrative that he vouched for Schottenheimer is also complete and utter bullshit. I mean, for all we know, Dak's in the lab with CeeDee Lamb going, well, we better get our stats up this year. We better play for ourselves because Jerry's unserious about winning. There's nothing we can do about it besides get paid and do what we got to do. Now, that's a drastic way of putting it, but what I'm saying is, do you think Dak is truly just enthralled that Schottenheimer is the guy that's supposed to bring him over the hump? You think he's just like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted? It's just, think for yourself. That's just a dumb narrative to think. It's dumb. And again, I vouched for Dak Prescott before he was paid his new contract to play out his final year and leave. Not out of thinking that he sucked, not out of thinking that he couldn't get the job done. I think he's a winner. I think he's an elite quarterback. I think he can actually make it to a Super Bowl outside of the Dallas Cowboys organization. I don't think he's ever going to win in Dallas, nor is anyone, until that family is out of that business, until it's out of the organization, until they get out of the way, until they find a coach that says no, kicks him out of the team meeting, says this is about football. I guarantee you, take it to the bank. Dak's a loyal guy, always wanted to play for the Cowboys. He's a good face behind the star. He's going to stay, and he's going to end up Romo 2.0. And I vouch for Dak Prescott more than anyone. And people say it's blind. It's like, well, you guys look at the final scores of his playoff games and you say it's all Dak. And you're like, well, if you really watch the games, no, it's not. There's a whole lot more issues going on. So don't get excited for this one, folks. I mean, this is going to be a fun year of NFL sports with the Dallas Cowboys. You're going to expect to see better things in 2025. And just a heads up, based on what we've been seeing with Shoddy's offense, Ashton Jeanty is going to be a Dallas Cowboy. And he's going to be another great player with wasted space on an organization that should be winning championships year after year. Welcome to Dallas Cowboys, Ashton Jeanty. You're going to get 400 billion carries every year, and you won't be able to walk by the time you're off your parents' life insurance. By the time you're 25, you'll be on a fucking cane. Congratulations. You're just like Ezekiel Elliott. Great talent, wasted. Oh, man. And yeah, I'm a Cowboys fan. Awesome. They're lucky I haven't jumped ship yet. Some of my friends have done it. Seems like a peaceful life. Don't have it in me. I just don't. Sorry. All right. Thank you guys for joining this episode. I hope you were entertained by it. I hope you learned some things. I hope you want to spark up some arguments or debates between what I've said when I post this content. Feel free to comment, like, share with your friends. Really pushing towards an aggressive approach this new season and finding our true identity as a show. And we will see y'all next week for another edition of the Shatter the Script episode. I'm your host, Jared May. You can find us on all platforms searching Shatter the Script. Thank you, everybody. We'll see y'all on Stats and Scars on Thursday or later this week. Whoever knows when that episode is coming, but it will be this week. And you'll hear from us. All right. See y'all later.